Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Way up there, that is usually the shoreline.
There's a long-term concern about energy security as a result of these droughts.
Drought conditions so severe, forcing BC Hydro to reduce power generation in some spots.
This is about a justice system that needs to be looked at.
Plus, in the wake of the death of a Burnaby RCMP officer, criticism over the province's handling of repeat offenders.
Like many of our members, I'm sure, I have mixed feelings about how the race ended.
And it's a one-man show as David Eby gets set to become the new BC NDP leader. The challenges ahead.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. It's another alarming sign of our province's unusually dry conditions. Water levels at Alouette Lake and Maple Ridge have receded to an incredibly low level. Now, CBC News has learned BC Hydro has reduced the amount of power being generated at that reservoir. As Michelle Gassoub reports, experts warn more extended periods of drought could spell a long-term energy crisis.
On a regular fall day, I could be swimming right here where I'm standing. But drought conditions in September and all the way into October mean water levels are incredibly low here at Alouette Lake. Alouette Lake in Golden Ears Provincial Park, normally a haven for swimmers and boaters. These bone-dry conditions are so extreme, the buoys normally floating in the middle of the lake are sitting on dry land.
Honestly, it's way up there. That is usually the shoreline, and these are in the middle. I mean, it takes me a good 5 minutes to swim out to this.
Water levels this low can threaten the fish and animals that use these waterways. BC also depends on the water from these lakes to generate hydroelectric energy. Alouette Lake is actually a reservoir managed by BC Hydro, and it sends water to two key places. First of all, to Alouette River for a salmon habitat, and two, through this dam to go on to generate power. But BC Hydro says right now water levels are so low, they're sending less water through here to create power so they can prioritize enough water to keep those salmon alive. BC Hydro said in a statement, managing reservoir levels is a normal procedure for our system of dams and reservoirs throughout the province, and that based on our modelling, we project being able to continue to maintain fish flows into the Alouette River.
It's kind of hard to imagine that the energy situation and the energy generation capacity would not be impacted.
Experts say more periods of prolonged drought could eventually spell trouble for BC's energy supply.
There's a long-term concern about energy security as a result of these droughts, and we know that moving into the future, based on climate change, we're anticipating there will be more hotter and drier summers, prolonged periods of drought down the road. So it's not just what's happening right now.
These conditions will also make this landscape more prone to flooding when the wet weather returns. Though for now, with rain finally in the forecast, there's relief this reservoir may soon fill up.
It's concerning and it's well worth praying for, and we'll be glad when the river starts filling up and the lake starts filling up and we've got rain again.
With hopes BC won't go from drought to floods in just a few weeks. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Maple Ridge.
Now, that lack of water is starting to have serious economic impacts on a number of industries. But tonight, Arlene Young is telling us about one activity that's been hit very hard. Now, you might think of mushrooming as a hobby, but it's a big industry, and the dry weather is causing big problems.
So we have just arrived at an undisclosed location because mushroom picking locations are very secretive. This is people's bread and butter to know the secret spot. So we've arrived here. We're with our guide, Hans. He's in the bush already. Let's go in there and see what we can actually find this year. Wow, you lifted that up and it almost looks like dust.
It is almost dust, yes. This time of the year, this stuff is usually wet and green. It's brown. Let's go through here a little bit. Just be careful when you go with your cameras, you don't fall on your nose. This is typical mushroom area. They love the moss, they love mature trees. This is what we need. And this year, unfortunately, there's nothing. Nothing.
Wow, so show me, where would you normally be looking to see?
Well, when you want to find the pine mushrooms, when you walk through the pine mushroom areas, you see little bumps. Like underneath the moss, it's so dry. That's where they usually grow, underneath the moss, they come up. And when they push through it, they are different. They're still white, you know, but they're not the same quality anymore. And so, same as chanterelles. Chanterelles grow in similar areas.
Right.
You know, but it's so dry. And not even the stinky mushrooms, I call them, the poisonous one. They usually survive everything. Nothing here.
So foraging for mushrooms might be fun and recreational for some people, but for others, it's actually big business. To learn more about the economics of it, I'm here at Ponderosa Mushrooms. We're going to talk to one of the two key players in the province who deal with wild mushrooms. Let's go find Joe Salvo. Right.
Perfect.
We're ready to go.
So that's what our beautiful chanterelles look like, which we miss terribly.
So there were some then out of Hogard.
We are getting a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not much to speak of, but that's a whole weekend's pick right here. Typical mushroom harvester's price for fresh chanterelle typically this time of year would be $2 to $4 a pound. We're at 10 now. We did get a nice period of rain up north in the terrace region, so we've had a nice flush of pine mushrooms or matsutake mushrooms out of there for the last month that we've been dealing with. Once now terrace is starting to wane, it's starting to fade away, and we have no new areas to go to. A week from now, we might not have any pine mushrooms to export. The pickers rely on it, the local economies rely on it, you know, and so there's a definite impact, you know, economically.
Look how deep.
You know, what does it say to you when you're seeing the?
It hurts. Yeah.
So what do you want people to know about that?
Well, as long as we don't smarten up with our excessive use of gasoline and even electricity, we're not going to have this stuff for very long. Or we'll have it. Nature will always look after itself, I think. But we have to take care of it a little bit more too.
Turning now to the race for the BC NDP leadership, the person who ultimately becomes premier of this province. David Eby will be declared the winner tomorrow, but it comes after a contentious leadership race. Eby faced off against climate activist Anjali Appadurai, who was disqualified by the party last night. But as Mira Baines reports, Appadurai shows no sign of backing down.
This is not how I think any of us expected this leadership contest to end.
David Eby, activist, lawyer turned politician and soon-to-be premier, will reveal his plans for the province on Friday after a leadership contest rife with complaints and 2 investigations.
It's mixed feelings for me for sure, but I really am excited about getting to work for British Columbians and delivering for them, and that's why I'm looking forward to laying out my plan for the first 100 days.
After being declared NDP leader tomorrow, his swearing in as premier is expected soon after. Eby says he contacted party members after the NDP's executive voted to disqualify climate activist Anjali Appadurai late Wednesday night. In a leaked report, the party's chief electoral officer found Appadurai broke campaign rules by improperly coordinating with third parties to encourage more people to sign up for party memberships to vote in the leadership race. The report also found some of the members signed up belong to the Green Party as well. Appadurai has denied wrongdoing and made her case on the steps of the legislature after being hit with travel delays.
A lot of us are feeling very disillusioned with the party, and we're feeling like the kinds of changes that we want to see are blocked at every turn. I don't think that's a reason to rip up our memberships, and I won't be ripping up my membership. I want us to stay.
BC's outgoing premier has little patience for those wanting party executives to be named publicly.
Because they're being inundated by people who say this is by Green Party members saying we want to take over your party. Leave them alone. They're doing their job, volunteers, and they're going to be abused by a bunch of people who cheated and want to get away with it.
The opposition leader says he's sad Appadurai has been tossed and aimed criticism at Eby's campaign.
I have got letters from the steel workers that have pointed out very clearly that, are saying that we need to sign up and elect David Eby in order to achieve this. We're not asking people to sign up and stay as NDP members. No, the reason they're not is they're saying just sign up so we can win.
Eby says he's looking forward to focusing on housing, climate change, and health care. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
And we are going to have more on this story shortly. Political science professor Hamish Telford will join us live to discuss Anjali Appadurai and the potential fallout of this leadership race. Well, one step closer to closure in a high-profile sex assault trial. Surrey rock musician Jacob Hogard has been given a 5-year prison sentence. In June, the Headley frontman was found guilty by a jury, but as Eli Glasner tells us, Hogard has been granted bail pending appeal.
There was a time when Jacob Hogard, the lead singer of Headley, was one of the biggest rock stars in the country. Hogard used that fame to meet women. He first connected with one Ottawa woman on Tinder, inviting her to Toronto, where they met at a hotel in November of 2016. What happened in that room led jurors to find Jacob Hogard guilty of sexual assault causing bodily harm. Today, the former rock star received his sentence, 5 years in prison. With his wife in tears, Hogard was led away in handcuffs. In a reasoning, Justice Gillian Roberts spoke of how Hogard degraded and destroyed the Ottawa woman's life. She described Hogard's many sides, both the charismatic rock star, but also the manipulative rapist. With the Crown looking for 6 to 7 years and defense pushing for 3 to 4, this legal expert says the judge played it safe.
The 5-year sentence to me met the mark. It was also the judge's way of sort of appeal-proofing a sentence appeal.
Outside the court, prosecutors supported the sentence.
Mr. Hogard's conviction and sentence sends a message to the community that sexual violence will not be tolerated by our community, by anyone.
Prosecutors are also hoping it will encourage sexual assault survivors to contact authorities.
I think survivors are always listening. The assumption that they're not is not true.
After different outcomes, this advocate says the women she works with are watching closely.
So when someone in a position of power, like a musician or a professor or a politician, is held to account on sexualized violence, that sends a message that no matter your social location, you will be held to a standard that everyone else should be held to.
Meanwhile, Hogard still faces a separate charge of sexual assault causing bodily harm for an incident that happened in Kirkland Lake, Ontario in 2016. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
The stabbing death of a Burnaby Mountie has renewed debate about the problem of so-called prolific offenders. The man accused of killing Constable Shaylin Young was wanted on another charge at the time of the incident. As Janella Hamilton reports, some say if the province doesn't act faster, more lives could be lost.
In honor of the fallen RCMP officer, Shaylin Yang.
The criticism has been swift.
This is about a justice system that needs to be looked at, and particularly with respect to releasing individuals who do have significant violent histories.
BC Liberal MLA and former Surrey RCMP officer Eleanor Sturco says the province needs to do more to better protect people against repeat violent offenders. She's calling for improvements to the current catch and release bail program that by law requires judges to consider release for anyone awaiting trial.
But it doesn't mean that we can't have our Crown prosecutors asking for chronic repeat offenders with violent criminal histories who pose a significant risk to public safety to be held in custody.
37-year-old Jungwon Ham, the man charged with first-degree murder in the stabbing death of Burnaby RCMP Constable Shaylin Yang, was facing 2 separate assault charges at the time of the attack. He was released and rearrested several times after failing to show up for court and was allegedly in breach of his bail conditions to not possess any weapons.
It's a tough job and it's a necessary job. And it's really tragic that we lost an officer in our province doing such good work in the community.
The attack comes just weeks after pleas from BC mayors led the province to pledge to tackle the issue. Premier John Horgan says he will be readdressing this issue with the Prime Minister in November.
We need to make sure everyone is talking about public safety, street disorder, and how we can support law enforcement.
But Sturco says the province is moving too slowly.
We're not asking them to change the reasons to keep people in jail. They exist. We're asking to make sure that prosecutors are making their arguments to ensure judges can have ample information and, in our opinion, make sure that we're putting those arguments forward as a priority.
A priority so that we don't see another life taken too soon. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the death of Constable Young has shaken people everywhere. Community leaders, officials, politicians at both local and national levels have offered their condolences. The CBC's Saurabh Sandhu has more on how Mounties and others are coping with the officer's death.
As her family, friends and wider community mourn Constable Shailin Yang, duty calls for her colleagues in uniform.
You've got condolences pouring in from all over. You've got inquiries coming from all over. You have several simultaneous investigations that have to take place while they're dealing with the death of one of their own.
The grief is plain to see among Burnaby Mounties.
We're all struggling to come to terms with this tragic loss. The hours, weeks, and months ahead will be difficult.
RCMP officials say support and counseling is being provided to staff. Heed warns such traumatic events may make officers more cautious dealing with people experiencing homelessness and addiction.
Dealing with some of the emotional health issue, mental health issues that the people they serve are facing right now. And officers are on edge. And when something like this occurs, they're going to be even more so on edge.
To observe a moment of silence in honor of the fallen RCMP officer, Shailin Yang.
The House of Commons held a moment of silence for Constable Yang on Wednesday. She was working as a mental health and homeless outreach officer when she was killed. The Prime Minister says such frontline police must have the right tools.
We need to make sure that they are not the only mental health workers out there accessible to so many people.
The National Police Federation says Yang is the 5th officer in Canada to die on the job in as many weeks. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, Orca researchers are celebrating family news from K-Pod. It officially has a baby girl. Photos from Fisheries and Oceans Canada confirm that the calf born in April is female, known as K45. She is the first new female for K-Pod since 2010. Now, this is good news for the southern resident orcas because the population's growth is limited by the number of reproductive females. The southern resident killer whale population is critically endangered, and its numbers have fallen to the low 70s. High school students at Science World today were lucky enough to hear all about the latest space innovations from astronaut Joshua Kutrick. Kutrick told students about his journey to become an astronaut, challenges with life on the International Space Station, especially mental health, and plans for traveling to the moon, Mars, and beyond.
But we're also talking in the 2030s about putting humans in spacecraft that are no bigger than, say, half the size of this room and sending them on a 2-year journey.
Kutrick also told students about the Lunar Gateway, the space station which will orbit the moon. Plans to launch could be as soon as 2023. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff is off today, and Kuljeet Kaila is here. Kuljeet, we were talking earlier in the show about this drought because that really is the weather story these days. Are we still on track tomorrow to get that rain?
We are. It will be a little bit, but it is finally coming, and we're going to do this big shift from summer-like weather to fall, and it's going to happen real quick, not because of one low-pressure system, but 2 that are coming. The first one will make its way across the north coast and sweep its way through the Caribou region, finally down to the lower mainland, a little bit bit of rain there. Then we'll get a second low pressure system that comes through. This is what we can expect for the days coming up. A little bit of rain on Friday, more on the weekend. Tuesday is the day that we get the most amount of rain, and a little bit more coming on Thursday with some cloudy conditions in between. But for today, we were above average in most places across the province, including Prince George and Whistler. And that, of course, means the fire danger warning is still happening, especially along the Peace region, through the Caribou, some spots on Vancouver Island as well. And hopefully that's the last that we'll see of it. Tomorrow, we're going to get a mix of snow and rain for Diesel Lake, so it's really going to cool down there. 8 degrees for Prince George, and overnight sunsets at 6:12, which it already did. Sun rises at 7:43 tomorrow. We're going to see a little bit of rain in the morning and into Friday afternoon with a 70% chance of rain. Anita, I'll have more details on the 7-day coming up.
70% sounds really good and much needed. Thanks, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
Well, he may have won the battle, but can David Eby survive the war? After the break, a look at the fallout from yesterday's NDP leadership race with help from a local political scientist. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Well, rising energy prices and climate change concerns have more people looking for ways to cut costs and their carbon footprint. And solar power is gaining popularity as an alternative energy source. One New Brunswick homeowner was so pleased with it, he staged an open house so others could see the results for themselves.
My name is Carl. This is our place here. We had this system installed about 2 years ago, and it's worked out really well. This is what's called a grid-tied solar array. So that means it's a system whereby we can generate a portion or all of our own power while remaining attached to the local power grid. So it means we get the benefit of generating our own power to lower our bills, but we still have the reliability of the grid backstopping us. This system was installed 2 years ago on our pre-existing home. So it's not something that has to be designed into a home specifically. I thought, I bet a lot of people would be interested in this if they could just overcome that barrier of learning how it works and how could it apply in their situation. So that's why I thought, why not have an open house? I know it would have helped me so much to have an open house like this to attend before I installed our system. I'm hoping this fulfills that same benefit to all of the people who are coming here today.
I was interested in seeing what the system looks like and how it works, and hearing about people's experience with it, so that I can make a better decision for myself in what I'm going to do at my house. So it's where the world is going. We need to get off fossil fuels. We need to save money on our hydro bills. It's all positive in my mind.
I think what I have enjoyed the most about this system is how it seamlessly takes over when there is a power failure. And to be honest, we don't even notice. There's a tiny, tiny flicker in the lights, and other than that, the batteries take over very seamlessly. Putting in solar is definitely an investment. You have to put money up front. But unlike a standard power bill, which you pay every month in perpetuity, solar actually pays back. So the payback on a system like this would be something like probably 9 years. And ironically, the higher power rates go, the shorter the payback period gets.
Well, it is official. David Eby will be declared the leader of the BC NDP tomorrow, clearing his path to become premier of the province. But while it was initially viewed as a coronation for the Attorney General, Eby's swearing in has been marked by political strife after the party decided to disqualify the other candidate, Anjali Appadurai. It came after a recommendation by the party's chief electoral officer over improper coordination with third-party environmental groups and fraudulent memberships. Joining me live now is political scientist Hamish Telford from the University of the Fraser Valley. Hamish, there's been much criticism over the way the party has handled this disqualification. How damaging can these things be in the short and long term?
In the short term, I think it's very damaging. There was the party has disqualified a young woman of color who had signed up lots of new members who were passionate about environmental issues and other social justice issues. And I think there's been some harm in the short term to people who are younger voters in particular, people who are concerned about the environment, female voters, voters of color. So I think one of the first tasks for new Premier David Eby is to heal some wounds and reach out to some of these groups and try and keep them in the fold now that they've joined the party.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that a little bit later, about the fact that, younger voters seem to have given a little bit of support to John Horgan. How do you think that David Eby can actually keep their support when he does reach out to them?
In a couple of different ways. The first thing he's going to have to do as Premier, of course, is to form a government, to select a cabinet. And he can put certain people into various ministries that might help. So someone like a Bowen Ma, for example, going into the environmental portfolio, has expressed concern about that issue. She is a scientist, an engineer by training, I believe. That would go a long way, I think, to appeasing some people who have concerns around the NDP's position on the environment. He could also promote others from the backbench, younger members from the backbench into parliamentary secretary positions or even into the cabinet, as well as reaching out to civil society groups and speaking with them, meeting with them, and trying to incorporate some of their concerns into his policy agenda going forward.
If Anjali had any support in caucus, do you think she would have had a better chance of surviving?
She may have done, and this was one of the things that was really very difficult for her. Even if she had won the leadership of the race, if she had stayed in and won the leadership of the race, her lack of support in the caucus and her relative inexperience in elected politics, I think, would have been a serious issue. I'm not absolutely convinced that caucus would have accepted her as Premier. She could have become the leader of the party, but not have been accepted as Premier, which is a situation, to my knowledge, has never happened before in Canadian politics. So that lack of caucus support was really problematic for her.
Okay, and just before we let you go, Eby says that tomorrow he will be talking about his plans for the future with the party. Any predictions, maybe some stuff that he hasn't talked about so far in his campaign for this race?
Oh, I think he's going to just re-emphasize what his key priorities are. And the number one priority is housing. And I think he will emphasize that point very strongly. He also had interesting things to say earlier on in the campaign about the opioid epidemic. And given the recent election results we've had at the municipal level around crime, homelessness, I'll be looking to see if he weighs in on that issue. It's obviously an issue of great concern to voters, particularly in Vancouver and some of the other outlying municipalities of the Greater Vancouver area, where the NDP has its broadest support. So I would be interested to see if he speaks to that issue tomorrow.
Political scientist Hamish Telford, thank you.
You're welcome, Anita.
She lasted 45 days. Chaos in the British government after the Prime Minister steps down. We'll take you across the pond next.
It was early this morning at the Via Rail station where steam buff enthusiasts from throughout North America began this one-of-a-kind journey. Why did you decide to come all the way out here to go on an old train?
Because it's a spectacular set of locomotives.
I like your engineer's hat.
You do?
Yeah.
I do too. I have a lot of them. I'm from, I live in Chehalis, Washington, but I work on a railroad up at Elby, Washington.
He wanted to, so I came along and it was a good excuse to get away from work.
Oh, so you're not the railroad buff, but he is.
That's right.
That's right. The trip was planned as a fundraiser for the Royal Hudson and Alberta Rocky Mountain Rail Societies. Some of these people have waited years for a trip like this.
Good morning, good morning. What do you eat?
As everyone began to board, we managed to get a look inside the cab of the Royal Hudson.
This is only the second time that I've ever operated this locomotive, but going to be the most exciting time for sure.
Then it was time to leave. The engines with a full head of steam heading for the first night stop in Kamloops. A dream come true for some people who live and breathe this kind of life when they get the chance.
I've ridden some steam, steam during the summer, during holidays and all that. This is just, it's unbelievable, really it is.
I worked on the 6060 in the shops in Jasper before we brought it out to BC for completion. And it's really great.
The train will make stops at Jasper, Prince George, and 100 Mile House before arriving back in North Vancouver next Tuesday. A trip even the employees enjoy.
I like this trip because it's something special for us, for everybody, and I hope we will continue to have these kind of trips.
Now, what could be better? The open road in front of us, people waving and looking on at every crossing, and suddenly we stop. Few of us notice it at first, but one of the passenger cars has left the rails. No one is hurt, or even shaken up for that matter, but the train is stuck.
All of a sudden, we heard this big bang. I looked, and there's rocks, sparks flying all over the place. The kid's running so he wouldn't get hit by him. And all of a sudden, the train stopped, so we looked, and big gouge right on the road. The cement was all just taken right apart.
For the people aboard the train, it was an experience they didn't expect, and one that they'll remember for a long time to come. There's no word at the moment as to when the train will get going again. That's just a question of time. Bob Gillingham, CBC News, near Chilliwack.
After a chaotic 45 days in office, UK Prime Minister Liz Truss has resigned. It's the shortest tenure for the post in British history. Margaret Evans brings us the latest from London tonight on Truss's exit and the talk about who could replace her.
The revolving door of chaos. That's how the Labour opposition party is describing 10 Downing Street after Liz Truss walked through it, this time on the way out, to announce her resignation.
We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
Meaning Britain will have a new Prime Minister again, its third in as many months, and by Halloween. It's been a bruising few weeks for Truss, forced by roiling financial markets to abandon a mini budget, promising massive tax cuts, but not a way to pay for them. She switched out her finance minister, but her own credibility was already on life support. One tabloid newspaper betting that a head of lettuce had a longer shelf life, and putting up a live stream of it. In the end, the lettuce won. But Truss was still fighting her corner as late as yesterday.
Economic credibility gone. And her supposed best friend, the former Chancellor, he's gone as well. So why is she still here?
I am a fighter and not a quitter.
But she did quit, her own party wielding the knife. Appointed resignation by her Home Secretary and a botched effort at party discipline in a critical vote, writing her political epitaph. Party officials have already set out the rules in the race to succeed her. Another internal vote in a Conservative party still very much divided.
There are different camps that just hate each other, and I think that's going to be the biggest difficulty for them in finding a new leader.
There's even talk that Boris Johnson might return from the nether regions of exile to throw his hat in the ring. But many people watching say the Conservatives have had their chance.
I don't think the Tory party necessarily have a mandate for what they're doing.
I think we need a general election.
That's unlikely. The Conservatives have 2 more years to govern.
That's Margaret Evans reporting from London tonight. Ottawa's police chief appeared before a commission that is investigating Canada's use of the Emergencies Act today. She admitted mistakes were made when dealing with convoy protesters in the winter and described the tensions between various police forces. Rafi Boudjikanian has the latest fallout from the Ottawa occupation.
When police moved in on the convoy in mid-February, multiple forces showed a unified front. But that was 3 weeks into the protesters' occupation, and today the inquiry heard law enforcement was anything but united in the time leading up to that clash.
The chief said something to the effect of, this is a strategy, this is a, I don't expect you to understand, but this is our house, and we're going to do this in our house. So I felt that was a bit of a power move that I didn't think was necessary in the circumstances.
That's how Acting Deputy Police Chief Trish Ferguson says her boss, Chief Peter Slowly, reacted to the RCMP and Ontario Provincial Police stepping in to help plan a response to the convoy. But she admits it wasn't just a matter of turf wars that slowed down reaction. Intel from the OPP showed the convoy planning a long-term stay, something Ottawa police seemed to ignore early on.
Do you think that might have been part of the challenge here, is that Ottawa Police Service was so used to dealing with certain kinds of protest that perhaps, but the template plan was dusted off, a few revisions were made and presented as being something that would be appropriate for this event?
I don't know that any service across the country would have anticipated what we saw arriving at our doorstep.
Are you concerned that maybe there was a failure to appreciate what may actually happen here and there was just too much reliance on what was done in the past?
I think there was definitely a failure to appreciate.
In fact, the document prepared by the OPP in February specifically called out the city police response for an unclear and vague command and control structure, a lack of collaboration, and a focus on maintenance and no resolution. All this as Slowly's own expected testimony still lays ahead. And today, another wrinkle, some of the lawyers at the commission officially requesting Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Deputy Premier Sylvia Jones, Solicitor General back then, to appear too, turning up the pressure on them beyond just their political opponents. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
In January, a family of 4 from India was found dead from exposure to the cold in Manitoba. It's not clear how they'd gotten there or why they were apparently crossing the U.S. border. The CBC's Fifth Estate has been probing the case, and that report airs tonight. Stephen D'Souza has this preview.
The death of the Patel family was shocking and tragic. 39-year-old Jagdish Patel, his wife Vaishali, their 11-year-old daughter Vihangi, and 3-year-old son Dharmik. Now, the Fifth Estate has learned that a convicted fraudster on the U.S. West Coast is being investigated by the RCMP as they look for a possible connection to the Patel case. His name is Rajinder Pal Singh, and he's accused of running a human smuggling operation in and around Blaine, Washington. And in January, at the same time the Patel family was being moved through Canada, U.S. authorities had Rajinder Pal Singh under surveillance, and they overheard him talking about border crackdowns in the Blaine, Washington area, saying that U.S. Border Patrol knows where migrants are coming from, and so therefore they, meaning human smugglers, have to do their work from Winnipeg. He also talks about having drivers in Toronto to pick up people and needing housing in Canada for migrants before they're smuggled over the border into the U.S. Now, there is no evidence directly linking him to the Patel family, but the RCMP is investigating him. But the Fifth Estate has also learned that there's some questions about when this information was shared, We know that the comments happened in January and that U.S. authorities had Rajinder Pal Singh under surveillance for 4 years, but Manitoba RCMP didn't learn about him until this May, many months after their investigation began and only after he was arrested. We've also learned that there are a number of other roadblocks in the RCMP investigation, among them recreating the timeline of the family's journey. The Fifth Estate has obtained exclusive video of the family arriving at Pearson Airport, showing them in their first days in Toronto. The RCMP says they were picked up by an individual, taken to a hotel, that they stayed at another hotel and a private residence. But from January 15th to the 19th, they have a black hole in the timeline. They don't know how the family got from the Greater Toronto area to the Manitoba border where they died. They say in part it's because people are reluctant to cooperate, perhaps afraid of the repercussions of dealing with law enforcement, or perhaps the repercussions from human smugglers. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
Death at the Border airs tonight on the Fifth Estate at 9 p.m. on CBC and on CBC Gem. Okay, Health Canada has recalled 1.5 million bottles of dry shampoo due to a cancer-causing chemical. Certain products by Dove, Bedhead, and Tresemme are recalled. They were sold between January of 2020 and just this month. If you have them, you're asked to immediately stop using them. Prolonged exposure to the chemical benzene may cause cancer. To check which specific products are recalled, you can go online to recalls.canada.ca. Well, the worldwide demand for energy will make it more expensive for you to heat your home this winter. As Anita Bathe explains, be prepared for a high bill to be the new normal.
Suzanne Kedley is replacing anything in her Ottawa home that uses natural gas.
Any energy I use in my house from now on, I can have a little less guilt.
She's replacing her furnace because she's worried about climate change.
So this is my new heat pump.
She's well aware of how expensive it was to keep that old furnace burning.
At the same time that I'm going to be decreasing my carbon footprint, I'm also going to be avoiding the higher gas prices.
That particular utility bill is going away at the right time. While natural gas prices have dropped from their summer peak, they're still higher than Canadians are used to, and they'll keep going up.
The prices we're at right now, I mean, they could relatively be low compared to what we might see in the next 3 or 4 months.
Russia's war on Ukraine drove up the cost of natural gas in a big way, and winter means demand will go up, but supply probably won't, because Canada is selling it elsewhere.
Now we have growing amount of exports going off to Europe and other places, which is a pull on our gas, which is going to keep the market tighter, and that translates into higher prices.
When we talk about doors, we want to look at weather stripping.
Energy auditors have tips to avoid those higher prices, say by checking the weather stripping on your door.
If they're stiff and they're torn and they're falling apart, it's time to replace it. And it's quite easy to replace. It's a lot of peel and stick that you can get from the hardware stores, and it's fairly inexpensive.
Whether you're just turning down the thermostat to save or spending big money on a heat pump, energy watchers say Canadians should get used to higher heating prices. Anita Bathe, CBC News, Calgary.
From BC to Alberta, warm weather has settled across the west. We'll have the reaction to the breaking record temperatures and what it means for some businesses' bottom line. Stick around. And at 6:42, a live look tonight at Whistler Village. The trees taking on the fall colors, and there is some snow in the forecast for the mountaintops. Kuljeet has the full forecast next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On November 9th, join CBC British Columbia's Michelle Elliott at a free online UBC alumni discussion about decolonizing arts and culture. Register today at alumni.ubc.ca. And never miss an episode of your favorite CBC drama or comedy again with the free CBC Gem app. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca.
You know, we keep talking about this unusually warm weather we've had here in BC, but we aren't alone. Parts of Alberta have also been experiencing a long stretch of summer-like weather this month. Many aren't complaining, but in the shadow of global warming, Aaron Collins tells us some are worried there could be a price to pay.
Like a gift that keeps on giving. Record-breaking warm weather lingering in Alberta, sparking conversations.
We were actually just talking about it when we got here. It's been absolutely beautiful. We've been extremely lucky this year.
People have been calling it hottum. What do you think of that?
Hottum, yeah, that's a good term. I bought like winter baby clothes and I'm not needing them yet, so.
So just how warm is it? Well, hot enough to make one more trim of the lawn necessary, making a tough transition for those in business to mow and clear snow.
This is more like June than October.
Yeah, it's been warmer this October than June of this year, which makes no sense to me. I think that the seasons have just moved.
The growing season may have moved too.
Oh, it really smells good.
Lettuce still coming up at this farm, even with Halloween just around the corner.
We estimate that since we've been here, we probably have on average, another 15 days of growing season. And that's basically, it's climate change.
He might be right. Heat waves are nothing new here, that's just weather. But this hot, dry spell is lasting longer than most, a temperature shift that many experts attribute to climate change. A potential problem for Alberta's farmers next spring.
And if this drying out of our soils is not balanced by increased precipitation events, well, then we are going to have more drought conditions. And this is unfortunately what we are facing for the next spring.
So while warmer fall weather is a welcome change, it's a worry too.
You know, you hear all this stuff about global warming and stuff. So I'm enjoying it, but in the back of my mind, it's kind of concerning.
A pleasant surprise that could signal trouble down the road. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Yeah, it really is wild to think about what we've actually gone through this October and what Alberta is going through as well, Kuljeet.
And it's all going to change for both BC and Alberta in the next few days. And it's because of a couple of low pressure systems that are going to start off on the north coast of BC and push through the Caribou, but also push some of that precipitation into Alberta. Temperatures will start to drop starting Friday well into the weekend. Daily highs will be dropping across BC as well as in Alberta. 4 degrees is what Calgary can expect in a few days. So that change is coming for both our provinces. For BC, some temperature drops to watch for over the next few days, up to 9 degrees in Nanaimo and Fort Nelson. So we're going to move from summer to fall very, very quickly in a very short amount of time. And I keep telling people today, get your fall wardrobe ready. You're going to need it. Current temperatures outside right now, 15 degrees in Pitt Meadows and at the airport. Also in West Van, 13 degrees. So these double-digit temperatures, they'll be gone in a few days, and we'll see some more rain coming. Starting on Friday night, just a little bit of rain, more on the weekend. The most amount of rain will come on Tuesday, and it will continue well into next week. So that long-awaited weather that we've been wanting and rain that we so badly need is on its way, Anita.
That is great news, and I definitely have all the sweaters out. They're sitting in a pile waiting to be used.
Perfect.
So.
Perfect.
All right, thanks, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
Canada's top doctor is once again urging everyone who is eligible to get their COVID-19 booster shots. That's because if infections go up, so will the strain on the healthcare system. And as Karen Pauls reports, experts say more Canadians need to roll up sleeves to avoid future pandemic-related restrictions.
At this Toronto vaccination clinic, people are preparing for a potential surge in COVID-19.
People, they're just over it.
but like the science is there.
The science leading to pleas like this one from Canada's top doctor.
Keep your COVID-19 vaccinations up to date.
Because she says the alternative could be a possible return to restrictions.
Whether, for example, mask wearing would help at least reduce some of that spread and the impact on the health system. Of course, many of these measures are taken at the local and provincial levels as well.
I'm not here announcing any restrictions.
But Manitoba's premier is encouraging people to get a booster shot.
We want Manitobans to be healthy so that they're at work and that they're able to help contribute to our economy.
About 80% of Canadians have received at least 2 COVID shots. Half the population has had a 3rd dose, but a 4th shot, just 14%. Based on daily infection numbers, experts describe the risk of catching COVID very high nationally, the highest level, severe, in Alberta, British Columbia, and Prince Edward Island.
You're going to be in deep doo-doo in a month or two if you don't start acting at this time.
This ICU doctor doesn't expect a deluge of COVID patients in hospital, but
if there's a outbreak among healthcare workers, then it can shut down significant parts of the hospital capacity.
And if that happens, he hopes politics won't trump science.
If the situation becomes sufficiently worrisome, then I think the government will have to act.
Back at the Toronto vaccination clinic, this man is worried about infecting his elderly mother.
Masks went away indoors, so I'd be happy to see that come back.
If more people like him take precautions voluntarily, maybe governments won't have to step in. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Accusations of monopoly at the movies. Coming up, why some independent theaters say they can't land big films.
What a piece of history. There was an eclectic collector, I guess you'd say, of just about everything. He passed away this past year, sadly, and he collected everything, and we were asked to go in and clear out a lot of the estate. And the jackets were one of the items that we picked up, and we're looking at these and wondering, who wore these? What were they for? They're children's sizes, so Petitine, made in Canada. I don't think any of the normal staff would be able to fit in those. So we've been wondering, why the jackets? MRA's was, as far as I remember, multi-leveled. So you'd go up 5 stairs to this level, big gorgeous wooden stairs, or up this way or around the corners. And true department store. We don't have any department stores anywhere. There are very few left in Canada. And you had your multiple departments everywhere, men's, ladies, children's, hats. They had it all. As you can see, it's beautifully made, fully lined, which you'd never find today. The label is Petitine, and it's Children's Wear Company Limited, Montreal, Canada. Again, very rare. Label still there and gorgeous, and it's in beautiful condition. I'd say that was done in Montreal. I'd say they probably ordered it, and it was done for them. I believe it's a wool blend, as far as I can tell, and that's probably what they would have used then, maybe wool and cotton blend. The buttons were little sort of brass-covered buttons, but they've been worn off a bit. You can see that. St. John history. It's a big part of who we are, and we've got to preserve that history. And St. John has a long, and as far as I'm concerned, glorious history, and this is just part of it.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Well, accusations of monopoly are being raised among small Canadian movie theaters. As Lisa Shing reports, some independent operators say trying to land top films for their screens has them stuck at the back of the line.
While business is starting to pick up again, Vancouver's Rio Theatre is still struggling.
It's extremely frustrating.
Many independent theaters have traditionally had to wait several weeks to show new films. Now it's up to 6 months, like for the South Korean film Parasite and dark comedy Everything Everywhere All at Once. These cinemas are caught between big chains and distributors. They blame Cineplex for monopolizing the market, considering it owns about 75% of the screens in Canada.
We've been told by distributors that if they give the film to us, then Cineplex will not play the film in their theaters.
Cineplex would not respond to CBC News' inquiries about these practices, but said in a statement, ultimately, it is up to film distributors where they play their movies. It did not agree to an interview. Neither did several distributors we reached out to.
It really is discouraging to see that it seems to be an act of greed, also a lack of concern for the consumer.
A couple of years ago, that theater owner filed a complaint with the Competition Bureau, but it stalled. Some legal experts say the competition laws are subjective, so it's tough to prove Cineplex is doing anything wrong. They're also getting hit from yet another angle. Many indie cinemas say Cineplex is branching out into their niche, art house films.
We're not a discount second run theater. We're just second run because we can't be anything else.
All this as the pandemic has changed how people get their entertainment.
Those audiences that might have gone to independent theaters to see these films are now choosing to stay home, and that's all tied in with, the way our movie-going habits have changed as a result of the pandemic.
In the meantime, these theaters are forced to find other options. That means hosting live music or renting out the venue to stay alive. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
That is it for CBC Vancouver News on this Thursday night. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.